People claim that Antarctica hides secrets that could rewrite history as we know it. Colossal pyramids buried in the ice, alien bases hidden deep underground, and maybe even the ruins of Atlantis itself. Hello friends, my name is Lana and this is Greg. If you are a returning viewer, then thank you for coming back, or if you are new here, then welcome. Here we like to talk about aliens, conspiracies, sometimes true crime, history. Basically, if it's weird, unexplained, or just generally interesting, I want to talk about it. Believe it or not, Antarctica hasn't always been this frozen wasteland. It used to be part of a supercontinent called Gondwana, kind of like one giant puzzle piece made of today's Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica, all kind of stuck together. And back then, Antarctica wasn't icy at all. It used to have rivers, it used to have swamps, dinosaurs. It used to look more like New Zealand or Canada in the summer. That's how different it was. But over millions of years, land started to break apart and drift away thanks to plate tectonics. Antarctica would eventually slip all the way down to the bottom of the globe, and when it broke away from South America and Australia about 34 million years ago, ocean currents wrapped around it like a giant cold water moat. That cut it off from the warmer climate, and over time the continent froze solid. And by about 15 million years ago, the Antarctica as we know it now had fully taken shape. Now, humans didn't actually find Antarctica until much later, but they did assume that it had existed. Ancient map makers would draw a giant landmass at the bottom of the map, and they would call it Terra Australis Incognita. And that literally means unknown southern land. They had no proof, it was basically just a hunch. And it stayed that way until about 1820, when explorers from Russia, the US, and Britain all caught sight of the Antarctic land all at once. And suddenly, the mythical land that was on the maps became real. Now, unlike most places in history, no one ever colonized Antarctica. Instead, the world actually came together and agreed that it should remain a neutral place. In 1959, 12 countries would sign the Antarctic Treaty, and that basically said that the land would only be used for peaceful reasons like science. No war, no land grabbing. Now over 50 countries have a slice of it, so Antarctica kind of belongs to everyone, which is pretty unique. Now, when people talk about Antarctica conspiracies, one of the biggest names that pops up is Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. Sometimes I'm going to look at my laptop because there's a lot of big words that are hard to remember. Now, if you don't know much about him, here's the rundown. He was a US naval officer, a decorated war hero, and one of the most famous explorers of the 20th century. Now, this guy led major pioneering expeditions to both the Arctic and the Antarctic. He made pioneering flights over both the North and South Poles, and he basically carved his name into the history books as one of the greatest explorers of all time. So on paper, he was a straight up legend. But alongside Richard Byrd's reputation for bravery and science, there's a mysterious story about a lost diary that he wrote. A diary that wasn't discovered by his son until decades after his death in 1957. Apparently, this diary was kept hidden by the US government because it held a secret so intense that it would shift our understanding of Antarctica and maybe even the world. This diary describes a secret flight that Byrd took in 1947 where he supposedly flew beyond the South Pole. And instead of the ice, snow, and the brutal winds that you would expect to see in Antarctica, he says that he saw something completely different. Lush green valleys, forests, flowing rivers, and animals as big as friggin' mammoths. And it wasn't just the scenery that was weird, because he was saying as he flew, his plane instruments were going all haywire. His compasses were spinning, his radio was cutting out, and nothing was working properly. And then, if that's not freaky enough, he says that his plane got taken over by some sort of invisible force. He didn't have control over this plane anymore, and then it was guided to some sort of hidden paradise. According to the diary, he didn't just land, he actually met inhabitants of this strange world. He described them as these tall, advanced beings with long flowing hair and a presence that gave off wisdom and peace. Some accounts even describe them as looking angelic or Nordic. So they welcomed him and they led him to a city that looked like it was made of crystal, and that's what some people refer to as the Rainbow City. Eventually he was taken to meet their leader, and he referred to that person as the Master. And the Master gave Bird a very serious message. He said that they had been watching humanity for a very long time from their little hidden world inside Earth, and they were not really that impressed with what they were seeing. They told him that they were very deeply concerned with the direction that humanity was going, especially with the use of nuclear weapons after World War II. They specifically referred to Hiroshima and Nagasaki as a turning point. To them, humans had become reckless children that could destroy not only humanity, but the whole planet. The Master basically warned Bird by saying if humanity doesn't change its ways, we're all kind of fucked. So after he was delivered this warning, Bird says that he was escorted back to his plane. Once again, that force took control, it lifted his plane off the ground, and it carefully guided him back out of the secret hidden world. And from there, he was back on his own again, probably wondering if he had just imagined the whole thing. But it didn't end there, because the diary says that when Bird got back, he did report this encounter to his superiors. But instead of being congratulated for discovering something incredible, he was immediately debriefed by the military, he was sworn to secrecy, and he was threatened to keep his mouth shut. He was told in no uncertain terms that if he talked about what he saw, his career was over. Moving on to Linda Moulton Howe, she is an investigative journalist and she's been looking into strange phenomena for a really long time, and she's interviewed a lot of different people about a lot of different things. One of these is a 2018 interview with a man only known by the name of Spartan 1, and he is a retired Navy SEAL and a former First Lieutenant Commander in Naval Special Operations. Oh, got it. He insisted that his real name not be used, but his story is bonkers. August of 2003, Spartan 1 said that he and his team found a huge octagonal structure that had been pushed out of the ground. And he described the doors as being 18 to 30 feet thick. That's 5.5 to 9 freaking meters thick. Not tall, thick. That sounds like you would need a bloody crane to pull them open, but he says just a little push with the finger and they opened. I don't know if they pushed open and moved to the side or if they swung open like normal doors, but the impression is that the technology is so advanced that heavy things can behave like really lightweight things. Temperature-wise, the outside air was freezing cold. It was below 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius, but when you would step inside, it was nice and warm, almost a comfortable 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 degrees Celsius. Now, interior lighting. Well, Spartan 1 says that the interior was a lime green, but there was no source of, where the light would come from. There was no light bulb or anything like that. The walls were carved with hieroglyphics, but not the type of hieroglyphics that you would see in Egypt. They seemed alien, so not any symbols that you would see in any other language on Earth. And this story is not the only one where people have claimed to have seen massive engineered structures in Antarctica. Another famous example is what people call the Antarctic Pyramid, and if you've seen the pictures online, you know what I'm talking about. It is a massive, perfectly angled mountain poking up through the ice in the Ellsworth Range. And from certain angles, it looks exactly like the pyramids of Giza. And for a lot of people, this isn't just some random rock formation. They believe that this pyramid is proof that Antarctica wasn't always a frozen wasteland. Maybe in a distant past, it was home to an advanced civilization, maybe even some extraterrestrials. See, in alternative history circles, pyramids are not just giant tombs. They're seen as giant power generators, giant structures built on specific points of the Earth's energy grid. The idea is that these pyramids are scattered around the planet and they're able to transmit energy wirelessly throughout the globe. And some people believe that this grid isn't just for humans. They think that it's an interstellar navigational system. Sometimes it's hard for me to get words out. I'm sure you've noticed that already. So they think it's a way for the extraterrestrials to move around Earth using the energy that the pyramids have generated. And if Antarctica has one of these pyramids too, then that kind of ties the whole planet together, because it's now not just these random civilizations that have them. Now, skeptics will say, hold up, it's just a mountain. It's called a nunatak. And a nunatak is a peak that sticks out of ice that glaciers have formed into a pyramid shape. And the Matterhorn looks like that as well. But the thing with the Antarctic one is you can't just hop on a plane and go over and have a look, thanks to the Antarctic Treaty. And let's be real, that only makes people even more suspicious. And if that doesn't raise your eyebrows, well, in 2018, a bunch of smarty pants internet researchers released coordinates for a crash site on South Georgia Island. The satellite imagery points out skid marks in the snow and ice. They were long streaks that looked like something had slid down a mountain and then come to rest. And some people say that the shape resembles that of Oumuamua, which is a strange object that passed through our solar system in October 2017. It's basically the 2017 version of our 3i Atlas. And Oumuamua is estimated to be about 45 meters long or 50 yards long. And conspiracy brains are like, well, maybe that object didn't fly past, maybe it crash landed somewhere. Now, Linda Moulton Howe interviewed another person in January of 2015. He was a US Navy flight engineer who spent over 14 years with the Antarctic Development Squadron. He asked to be called Brian, so we don't know his real name, but what we do know is that from 1983 up until 1997, he took part in many missions, from rescue missions to supply drops, but one mission stuck in his head more than the rest. During a time-urgent medical event, Brian said that he and his team flew over a no-fly zone to save time. And there they found a huge circular entrance into the ground, around 60 meters or 196 feet in diameter. And as they approached, same as before, all of their instruments went wonky. And this plane crew were experienced. These men had seen, really, really bad weather, mechanical failure, but they say that this seemed different. They completed their medical evacuation, they returned to their base, and they were met by men in suits. Probably the Men in Black. And they told them bluntly, never fly over that zone again and never speak of it again. Now, I want to talk about the theory of Antarctica that makes me the most happy. And that is the idea that Antarctica is hiding this ancient, advanced world beneath all that ice. The legend of Atlantis. For centuries, Atlantis has been one of the biggest mysteries in human history, and it was originally described by the Greek philosopher Plato. And Atlantis was meant to be this great and powerful civilization that allegedly sank into the sea around 9,000 years before his time. And ever since, people have speculated on where Atlantis might have been, if it ever existed at all. Most traditional theories place Atlantis in the Mediterranean near Santorini, the Atlantic Ocean near the Canary Islands, or even near the Americas. But one of the more fascinating theories is that Atlantis was actually Antarctica, now buried under miles of ice. So Plato describes Atlantis as a large island larger than Libya and Asia combined. It was apparently located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is now what we call the Strait of Gibraltar. And it was a place that sank due to a cataclysm around 9600 BCE. And if taken literally, then Antarctica is indeed a massive landmass. It's larger than Europe. It's hidden beyond the Mediterranean world of Plato. It lies beyond the Atlantic routes. And if you stretch the interpretation of beyond the pillars, then you could argue that Antarctica fits the description. In the mid-20th century, the Atlantis-Antarctica connection got a huge boost from Charles Hapgood. He was a history professor who wrote the book Earth's Shifting Crust, and he proposed that Earth's outer crust would occasionally slip over the inner layers, and that would dramatically shift entire continents into new positions. According to him, Antarctica wasn't always where it is now. He argues that about 12,000 years ago, it was much further north, giving it a warmer climate. And if that were true, then Antarctica could have been ice-free and supported a human civilization. This fits with Plato's Atlantis destruction in 9600 BCE, which happens to coincide with the end of the last ice age and the Younger Dryas, which is a period of sudden global climate upheaval. And even Albert Einstein wrote a preface for Hopgood's book. He said that it was really worth considering even though he didn't fully endorse it. Then we have the Piri-Reis map, which is one of the most famous pieces of evidence. It was drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri-Reis. This map shows parts of South America, Africa, and an ice-free continent that looks a lot like Antarctica. Hapgood and his followers argued that the Piri-Reis map was based on much older source maps, possibly from ancient civilizations which accurately depicted Antarctica before it was covered in ice. If true, this would suggest that someone in prehistory mapped Antarctica in detail, which would only be true if advanced civilizations existed long before conventional history suggests. Then we have the Younger Dryas theory. The end of the Ice Age around 12,000 years ago was a time of massive global upheaval. Sea levels rose, climates shifted, and megafauna, aka big-ass animals, went extinct. The Younger Dryas impact theory suggests that a comet or asteroid hit the Earth around 10,800 BCE, and this triggered sudden cooling, floods, and wildfires worldwide. And if Atlantis was Antarctica, then this would match Plato's description of a world-destroying catastrophe. Now, not long after the end of World War II, the United States Navy decided to send nearly 5,000 people, 13 ships, and more than 30 aircraft down to Antarctica. It was officially called the United States Navy Antarctic Developments Program, but everyone knows it as Operation High Jump. And the man in charge was Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd, who is the guy that we were talking about earlier. On paper, the mission was described as a massive training and mapping operation. But when you look at the timing and the sheer scale of the expedition, it's easy to see why people have linked it to leftover Nazi activity in the Antarctic. Now, here's the background. Before World War II, Germany did have an Antarctic expedition. In 1938, the Nazis sent a ship to a region called Neuschwabenland, or New Swabia. Officially, the trip was to scout whaling grounds, but conspiracy theorists think that it was part of a larger plan to build a permanent post in Antarctica. Fast forward to 1945, Hitler's regime had collapsed, but some rumors had spread that some high-ranking Nazis had escaped capture. And the theory goes that they established secret hidden bases under the ice and mountains. And this is where Operation High Jump becomes really interesting, because why send thousands of people and dozens of ships and planes and even a submarine if the mission was only used for training and scientific purposes? Something else that's interesting is not long ago, if you wanted to zoom into Antarctica on Google Earth, you'd be able to see everything. But now certain areas are really blurry, they're really pixelated, or they just have really low resolution. And some people claim it is intentional censorship by the government, which we shouldn't be surprised about, and it's meant to hide secret alien bases or hidden ice walls, and others think it's the start of a conspiracy about governments trying to keep Antarctica mysterious and off limits. One of the most visually striking features of Antarctica is called Blood Falls, and at first glance it looks like a stream of actual blood, but it's really just iron-rich water that's been trapped below the glacier for possibly millions of years. Blood Falls is also a reminder that Antarctica is not static. Beneath its icy surface, there are massive forces at work. And one dramatic example of this is ice quakes. Ice quakes are seismic events that happen when ice will crack, move, or shift. And unlike earthquakes, ice quakes are barely noticeable unless you're standing on top of the glacier at the right time. But they are surprisingly frequent in Antarctica, with hundreds of thousands of them happening each year. These quakes can be caused by temperature changes, which makes the ice expand and contract. Melting and refreezing cycles can also trigger fractures as the water moves between the layers of ice. Monitoring ice quakes is really important because it tells scientists how glaciers are moving. It tells them how stable ice sheets are and how the frozen continent might react to climate change. But where there's mystery, there's always room for imagination. And that is where the flat earth theory and the concept of an Antarctic ice wall comes into play. According to this theory, the earth isn't a globe, it's a flat disk. And Antarctica doesn't exist as a conventional continent. Instead, it forms a massive ice wall that encircles the outer edge of the earth. It's meant to hold oceans in place and prevent anyone from falling off the edge. Supporters of the ice wall theory often cite historical maps, vague accounts from early explorers, and the continent's extreme inaccessibility as evidence. And in their narrative, the ice wall is not just a physical feature, it's a guarded barrier. It's protecting our world from curious explorers and prying eyes. In some versions of the story, the ice wall conceals alien bases, lost civilizations, or advanced technology buried beneath the ice. Now, Antarctica does have ice cliffs that could look wall-like, but there is no evidence of a circular boundary enclosing a flat disc. Now, you guys know that I love me a bit of a conspiracy theory, but this one is a bit far-fetched for me. I personally don't understand, who cares if the Earth is flat or circular? It could be a friggin' dodecahedron for all I care. Of all things to lie about, why lie about the shape of the Earth? What does that really matter? I know I could be wrong. I'm not saying that I'm right, but I think that flat earthers are wrong. And that is a wrap-a-rooney on our icy trip through Antarctica. Let me know in the comments if this is the first time that you've heard about a lot of this stuff, or if you've already heard about it before and what did you think about it. And if you like this one, then please subscribe and check out some of my other videos. I've got a good one on the Men in Black that was really fun for me, and I've also got one on a popular UFO sighting. And I can link both of those in the description for you. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.